What's going on, guys, and welcome to another Doctor Who classic review. Today we're going to be reviewing the first Doctor William Hartnell story, Planet of Giants. So this is actually, it's a 3-part story, although it was originally supposed to be a 4-parter. The third and fourth episode ended up kind of getting blended together into one part to become a 3-parter. I think from what I heard, this was to give An Unearthly Child an extra episode, I think. So a little bit interesting there. Obviously they had so many episodes they could work with. This is actually the first episode of season 2. So yeah, interesting just how that all works out there, because, you know, Unearthly Child, of course, the first episode of season 1. So I don't really know how that all works, but yeah, it is a 3-parter. So first of all, let's get on to the cast. I think on the most part, the cast, well, I mean, on the whole, really, the cast is pretty good. William Hartnell's very good as the first Doctor. Susan's great, Ian's great, and Barbara's pretty good as well. There's nothing really stand out with any of the characters in this one, in my opinion. There's quite a lot of dialogue in this story. It is mostly a dialogue-heavy story, but yeah, it's decent from the whole cast. Nothing bad, nothing really, you know, great either, but just all right. So let's get on to some points here, starting off with, it's an interesting concept of the TARDIS doors opening mid-flight and causing the TARDIS and crew to become 1 inch tall. So basically what happens at the start of the story, the TARDIS doors just randomly open, the Doctor's like, oh no, this is not good. In the end, he's like, oh well, I can't find anything wrong, so I guess we'll land and just see what's going on here, because there doesn't seem to be anything wrong. Then when they land, they step out of the TARDIS, they find out that they've actually been miniaturized down to about 1 inch tall and are just kind of in a garden, and they are now really, really tiny. So, very interesting concept, for sure. The front cover of this one has got the Doctor and Susan with some giant ants next to them. And, you know, I was really hoping that we would see a bit more of the giant ants and stuff. You know, the giant ants, there's like a giant earthworm or something I think that they see at the start as well. You've also got a fly in there too. I really hoped we'd see a bit more of those. That doesn't really end up being the case. We actually don't really see much of the giant insects at all. And when we do see them, they pretty much don't move. They're just like static things. They're all supposedly dead from this insecticide, which is kind of the whole thing with the story. So I was pretty disappointed with that, actually. I was really hoping for some, you know, cool stuff with these giant insects, but alas, it's not really what we got. The giant sets actually look pretty good for the 60s. That is one thing I will say. The sets of this episode actually look pretty good. So, yeah, apart from when, like, you know, they're looking at that guy that got shot and they're just like looking at his face and it's just this giant face in front of them, that looks a bit crap. Everything else though, mainly I'm thinking like the sets inside, you know, when they're like in the kitchen sink and when they're in the drain pipes and stuff like that. Those sets are pretty good. The outdoor sets are decent, but there's not a whole lot going on there. But the inside sets especially, I'm thinking especially the sink set, actually I think looks really good, and yeah, it's quite believable they have been shrunken down to size. Barbara touching the insecticide but not telling anyone, so that's a big thing in this story. They find, Ian and Barbara are together, they find this kind of pile of seeds, and Barbara grabs one of the seeds and is kind of, you know, interested by it, because it's like, you know, this is a tiny little seed, but with the size that we are, it is pretty damn massive. It's like bigger than your head. So she's just pretty amused by that, but then Ian's talking and he's like, yeah, you know, it's all sticky and weird, and it turns out these seeds have been kind of sprayed, I guess, with this insecticide, and a fly lands on these seeds and instantly dies, pretty much, you know, confirming Ian's theory there of these seeds being full of this insecticide. And, you know, he's kind of going on all the time about, oh, you know, even just touching it, you'd probably die from it. And basically Barbara starts freaking out a little bit, and throughout the next couple of episodes she starts feeling unwell, and it is because of this insecticide. She doesn't tell anyone though until she pretty much passes out, and then I think the Doctor and Ian pretty much just figure out, yeah, you've touched the insecticide there, and she eventually gives in and says that that is what she's done. So I think it's an interesting little bit of peril there, because generally I don't think there was enough peril in this episode. You kind of had the thing with, you know, the doctor and Susan, I think it was, in the sink when the tap got turned on. That was a bit of peril, but I think it was a bit anticlimactic. I also just think, you know, like I said before, having the insects there, which is what I thought the episode was really about, which it wasn't, would have made it a bit more interesting, but alas, it didn't. The plot of the insecticide and the businessman is a bit bland and just generally not very interesting. So yeah, I think maybe it's just the fact that I went into this one kind of expecting a, you know, either giant insects, they're on a planet with giant insects, or they've been shrunken down to size and these insects are now giant compared to them. And, you know, it would be a nice little story of trying to escape from these giant insects. That wasn't what it was at all. It was this whole thing about this businessman making this insecticide to kill off every known living insect in the world. And it was just a bit of a bland plot and something that I didn't find very interesting. Pacing is very slow throughout, especially considering it's only 3 parts. That is another thing that I really notice here. It's only a 3-part story, but it's very slow. The first 2 episodes especially, very slow. Episode 3 is not too bad, although I think that is because, and that's my next point, episode 3 and 4 have been condensed, so it's a bit faster paced, but you can tell that 2 episodes have been shoved together because it just feels like, it feels very jarring. There's points where it just kind of fades away and comes back again. They're in a completely different place. There's a couple of moments where I can't remember exactly on top of my head, but there's one moment from Ian, I remember he says something, and he says something in a way that, like, you're obviously supposed to know what he's talking about, because I'm guessing that probably happened earlier on, but they've cut that part out, so now what he's saying doesn't really make sense. There's a couple of moments like that, which, yeah, put me off quite a bit. Finally, the ending felt unsatisfying, with the guy just being arrested and the doctor didn't really do anything. That's one of my main things with this episode. The doctor and co don't really do anything to save the day in this episode. They, you know, they find that phone. I think they find out that this guy's making this insecticide, and they try calling people on the phone, but they're really small. Their voices are super high pitched, so nobody can actually hear what they're saying. The day kind of gets saved in the end, just because, you know, the guy killed the other guy, and people on the phone kind of worked that out themselves, sent the police round, and the guys got arrested. And then, yeah, the doctor just kind of got back to the TARDIS and they left and managed to get themselves back to normal size again. So felt pretty unsatisfying, that whole thing. Bit of a meh resolution in my opinion. But that's my review for Planet of Giants. A rating out of 10. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. It's okay, because it's only 3 parts long. I can give it a little bit more wiggle room. It's decent, but I think it's mainly because it just wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be plot-wise, and was very talkative at times. I was hoping for more stuff with the insects, with the ants and stuff. And yeah, the whole plot of the insecticide and killing the guy was just not really to my liking, but 6 out of 10, it's still decent, but yeah, definitely nothing special. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.